Good morning to our viewers and participants, and welcome to this online discussion, Supporting Democracy and Security, the War in Ukraine. Thank you for joining us. My name is Katie O'Connor. I am representing the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation, UK and Ireland office. The Foundation, through its civic dialogue and education programmes, promotes peace, freedom and European values. This is the second event in a three-part series of events together with European Movement Ireland this year, all of which are focused on the theme of supporting democracy. We all have an important role, individually and collectively, to support a safe and peaceful future in functioning democracies. In the words of Konrad-Adenauer, we all live under the one sky, but we don't all have the same horizon. Our thoughts are with the people of Ukraine. Russia's aggression is not only an attack on Ukraine, but also an attack on our European and international order. I am pleased to welcome and look forward to hearing from our distinguished speakers. Ireland's Minister for Foreign Affairs and Minister for Defence, Simon Coveney, and Germany's Ambassador to Ireland, His Excellency, Meier-Klodt. Noelle Connell, CEO of European Movement Ireland, will chair this morning's event. There's plenty to discuss. Noelle, thanks to you and to your colleagues for organising this event. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Katie, and a very good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and to those of you who are joining us in Ireland, Germany and beyond. We're delighted to see such a large turnout for the second, as Katie mentioned, in the series of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung European Movement Ireland series of events with the theme of supporting democracy. And we're especially privileged to have a distinguished panel of speakers with us this morning for this morning's webinar on supporting democracy and security, the war in Ukraine. The theme of today's session will discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the implications for European security and other policy areas. We will also look and focus on the EU's response to the war, Ukraine's future in the EU, and arising geopolitical developments. Before I introduce our distinguished panel of speakers this morning, if I may, I would like to acknowledge and pay a especially warm welcome and express our solidarity with the Ambassador of Ukraine to Ireland, Her Excellency Larissa Gerasko, who is joining us online this morning, I believe, and our thoughts are with you, Ambassador. To help us examine the pressing issues of today's webinar, I'm honoured to welcome our two speakers, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Minister for Defence, Simon Coveney, and His Excellency Meier-Klodt, the Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Ireland. So, gentlemen, a very warm welcome to you both this morning. And shortly, the Minister and the Ambassador will deliver their opening remarks, and then we move on to a panel discussion. And that's an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, for you and the audience to send in your questions and comments for the Minister and the Ambassador. And I've promised that we will be on our way in good time in an hour. So we'll be finishing up at 10:15 sharp. So I would encourage you all to get your questions in if you can. And you can email them in to events@europeanmovement.ie, the question form on European Movement Ireland's live event centre on our website. And those of you active on social media on today's event, please do use the hashtag supporting democracy and EMICAS. And our colleagues who are monitoring the social media platforms will forward on your comments and questions to me. So we all have some small appreciation of how incredibly busy our first keynote speaker and our guest of honour, Minister Coveney, is. So, Minister, really I'm very grateful for you this morning for taking the time to be with us. So without further ado, if I may hand over and welcome Minister for Foreign Affairs and Minister of Defence of Ireland, Minister Simon Coveney. Minister, the virtual floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Ambassadors, in particular, Larissa, but also others. And thank you for this invitation to discuss democracy and security, and of course the repercussions of the illegal war in Ukraine for both of these issues. In fact, this is a particularly good opportunity to discuss the impact of war on Europe as a whole. As I've just returned from 2 days of meetings with my EU colleagues at the Foreign Affairs Council and subsequently with the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe in Strasbourg yesterday, Russia's invasion of Ukraine and by extension its rejection of the UN Charter, as well as its use of brutal force to try and achieve its aims, have far-reaching consequences for Europe, the world, and for the themes that we're discussing this morning. In examining this war, we can talk about both external and internal implications for the EU and its policies. In terms of the EU's relationship with the wider world, the Treaty on the European Union commits us to contribute to peace, security, and strict observance of the development of international law, including respect for the principles of the UN Charter. And so first and foremost, our reaction to the invasion has been to move to strengthen, to fortify and defend the multilateral system. Of course, for Ireland, the global rules-based multilateral system has been used effectively since our independence to promote our values, including democratic norms and universal human rights, as well as upholding our own security. We took on the challenge, of the UN Security Council membership with our eyes wide open in 2020. We knew that the Security Council reflects global reality and that there are many conflicts in the world where the great powers are either directly or indirectly involved and therefore are difficult to resolve politically at the Security Council. We knew that this level of involvement would feed through to the work of the Security Council, but that said, the persistent stalemate we've seen on some of the most important issues on the Council's agenda, including on issues, of course, like Ukraine, but also Syria, Afghanistan, the Middle East peace process, and Myanmar, as well as others, has been deeply frustrating, not only to Ireland, but to other Council members as well, and to the wider UN family. However, we haven't resigned ourselves to this status, and nor should we. We continue to believe elected members can play a critical role in overcoming divisions at the Council. We tried to use our position as an elected member of the Council constructively, bringing what we think anyway is a principled and independent perspective to the full range of issues on the Council's agenda, in line with our 3 guiding principles, which is building peace, strengthening conflict prevention, and ensuring accountability. We are working at the Council to hold Russia accountable for what they're doing, urging it to end its war immediately and calling out Russia's cynical attempts to use the Council and other UN bodies to spread disinformation. We've been amongst those leading efforts at the UN to bring an end to the war, of course, in Ukraine. And we'll continue to work with our partners to respond to this aggression and to hold Russia to account, and also to listen to Ukraine in terms of what they need and want. The Security Council has met to consider Ukraine 22 times, most recently yesterday. On the 9th of April, I debriefed the Council following my visit to Ukraine and bore witness in the Council chamber to what I'd seen, focusing primarily on what I'd seen in the town of Bucha outside Kyiv. The awful actions committed as part of this aggression should not be forgotten, and people need to be held to account. Ireland has joined over 40 states in referring the situation in Ukraine to the International Criminal Court. Recognizing the additional pressure that this investigation is likely to place on the resources of the court, Ireland has decided to make a voluntary contribution of €3 million to the International Criminal Court, and €1 million of this contribution has already been delivered to the Office of the Prosecutor to make sure that financial resources are no barrier to making progress on legal cases. The reports of forced deportations of Ukrainians, especially children, to remote regions of Russia are extremely alarming. Is this history repeating itself? We've been vocally highlighting this issue at the UN Security Council and the UN Human Rights Council. Where the Security Council has been unable to act, we have supported moves at the General Assembly and other UN bodies to call out Russia's aggression. It was particularly welcome that Russia was removed from the Human Rights Council and indeed the Council of Europe, which Ireland currently holds the presidency of. We are conscious that this conflict is affecting countries beyond Europe as well. Global food security, already precarious before this war, has worsened significantly. The EU will remain a responsive, and I hope responsible and reliable global actor in facing the challenge of global food security. At this moment, there are around 20 million tons of grain trapped in Ukraine. This grain is trapped by the transformation of Ukraine and the Black Sea from a supplier of food into a war zone by Russia. The EU always stands ready to play a part in addressing global challenges, irrespective of their cause. And we're working closely with the UN Global Crisis Response Group in support of UN efforts, in particular to get grain out through the Black Sea. Through solidarity lanes, the EU is making efforts to get as much Ukrainian grain as possible to global markets and supporting Ukrainian farmers to sow and produce in the midst of this war. And can I single out in particular Poland and Romania, who've made significant efforts in this regard. In our global food security response, the EU and its member states are making an overall contribution of more than 5 billion euros in humanitarian and development assistance for global food security up until 2024. This war, of course, has tested our own internal resilience as a union. When the invasion commenced, Commission President von der Leyen stated that we would react with unity, firmness, and determination. With some exceptions, I think we have done that. Ireland has supported a maximalist approach to sanctions, and we continue to support the toughest possible measures, including a ban on Russian gas, to complement the recent decision on oil. The continuation of this war for Russia has got to have a cost, even if that involves sacrifice on our behalf within the European Union. So far, Irish financial institutions have frozen funds to the value of over 1.72 billion euros linked to sanctioned individuals and entities. The European Commission has provided 1.2 billion euros of emergency macro-financial assistance to Ukraine. We've said that as the EU, we are ready to grant Ukraine new exceptional macro-financial assistance of up to 9 billion euros this year. The European Commission has also allocated 243 million euros in humanitarian assistance, and Ireland's bilateral contribution has been 20 million euros in humanitarian assistance so far, through UN agencies and the Red Cross family, as well as NGOs and with local partners. We've also supplied over 3.7 million of in-kind medical assistance as well. The EU has also agreed a 2 billion euro support for Ukraine's military under the European Peace Facility. And of course, Ireland will contribute its full share, focusing on non-lethal elements in this package. So far, we've contributed 44 million euros to support Ukraine's military in an effort to help them defend themselves. As you may know, Ireland's policy of military neutrality has long been an important strand of our independent foreign policy for many decades. In practical terms, as practiced by successive governments, this policy means that Ireland does not participate in military alliances or common or mutual defence arrangements. But it has not stopped us from participating in world events or being affected by them, nor has it rendered us inactive in situations of injustice like what's currently happening in Ukraine. Militarily neutral, we've always been politically very active, promoting peace and development through the United Nations, the European Union, and our own bilateral initiatives. And yes, taking sides in conflicts when it is justified to do so, as it is now in Ukraine. For over 60 years, not a day has passed when Irish peacekeepers weren't on duty in blue helmets somewhere across the globe. In fact, our Defence Forces' record of continuous service is the longest of any UN member state. We've also shaped and contributed to the development of the UN's Common Security and Defence Policy, and are a major contributor to UN-mandated EU-led peacekeeping and conflict prevention missions. At the same time, it's clear that the security situation in Europe has now changed quite fundamentally. Russia's attack on Ukraine, the decision by Finland and Sweden to seek NATO membership, and the upcoming response to the recommendations of Ireland's Commission on the Defence Forces have all brought security and defence issues to the fore in our own domestic debate. We are living in a new era in Europe. Chapters of history are unfolding as we speak, in which Ireland faces security and defence challenges that are not the same as those we faced in previous decades. Cyber and hybrid threats, for example, have emerged as serious and ongoing threats to global, regional, and national security. In this context, there is undoubtedly a need for a debate on security and defence policy in Ireland, to reflect on the security and defence challenges we face as a country and the best way for us to respond to those challenges. The Taoiseach has indicated that the issues could potentially be discussed through a citizens' assembly or some other framework. However, as I've stated previously, the government's immediate focus remains on easing the plight of the Ukrainian people and holding the Russian leadership to account for what they are doing. As I've said, Ukraine is on the front line of defending democracy and the fundamental freedoms in Europe. With that in mind, I want to speak for a moment about Ukraine's application for EU membership and the path towards Ukraine taking up its rightful place in the EU family of nations. On the 17th of June, the European Commission recommended in a formal opinion that Ukraine be granted candidate status on the understanding that certain steps are taken. Ireland strongly supports the Commission's recommendation. We've been advocating it for it for months. If endorsed by the European Council later this week, it will place Ukraine on a firm and I hope irreversible path towards EU membership, which is where Ukraine belongs. As the opinion states, the aspirations to belong to the European Union has for many years been an important priority for Ukraine, its governments and its citizens. It's been an underlying motive for democratic change for the past decade and a driver of a number of key reforms founded on European values. Ukraine's parliament ratified the Istanbul Convention only this week, and this is an important signal of the seriousness with which Ukraine is focused on implementing reforms necessary for joining the EU. The fact that they would focus on that in the midst of a war, I think, says an awful lot. Every sovereign country has the right to determine its own future, free from external pressures and duress. And the people of Ukraine have chosen a future in the European Union, and they deserve our full support in terms of getting there. Ireland has long advocated for this outcome, and I strongly support Ukraine's EU perspective and have done so at the Foreign Affairs Council again this week. The European Commission opinion will provide an important signal too, though, to the people and government of Ukraine who have stood firm in defence of our shared European values in the face of this appalling war which Russia is waging on them. It is a message that Europe stands with them now, that we will continue to stand with them in the future, and that we will support the rebuilding of Ukraine. That message is being clearly sent, I hope, to everybody in Ukraine and to all Ukrainians living across the European Union temporarily, coming from European leaders this week at the Council meeting. Earlier this year, Ireland marked 30 years of bilateral relations with Ukraine. Our ties have deepened over this time, and our friendship has intensified also over the recent months as Ukraine faced the dreadful challenges of resisting large-scale invasion. I know that this friendship will continue to deepen, not least because of the increased contacts we've had between our peoples, with so many Ukrainians finding refuge here in Ireland, over 36,000 now. Ukraine's path towards EU membership is now clearer, and Ireland is ready to help with any practical steps needed along this path on a bilateral basis, but also within the European Union. It's now been over 100 days since the large-scale invasion began. The responsibility for this bloodshed rests solely with Russia, and it is incumbent on Russia to withdraw and to respect the sovereign rights of another UN member state. Russia's attempt to win territory by force must fail. We have gained too much from dialogue, from multilateralism, to allow such unilateral violence to ride roughshod over democracy, peace, and security. Ireland and the EU will continue to pursue this objective unrelentingly. And as we continue to do that, we will do everything we can to support and to protect and to encourage and to fund, and if necessary, also to politically support the Ukrainian people and those who lead them. Unfortunately, we are living through a changing Europe, unfortunately for the worse, because of aggression and an illegal war that's being waged by Russia. We need to respond to that with firmness, with solidarity, with strength, with the capacity to make difficult decisions quickly, if necessary, and most importantly, with unity. And I think if we do that, we can ensure that Europe as a continent finds a way through this, and of course, Ukraine, along with many other countries as well who want to join the European Union for all the right reasons, can continue to steadily move in that direction. So thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Many thanks, Minister, for that really comprehensive and wide-ranging address. And I was, particularly struck by your remarks of that, the fact that we are living through a new era in Europe, and certainly one that has lots of challenges. And I'm looking forward to our discussion. And our next speaker this morning, delighted to be joined by Germany's Ambassador to Ireland, Meier-Klodt. And Cord, I'll pass over to you, Ambassador, now for your address. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, dear Noelle O'Connell, dear Katie O'Connor, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, colleagues and friends. I would like to thank the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung and European Movement Ireland for inviting me to this eminent panel side by side with Minister Coveney, and thanks to you, Minister. It is obviously not an easy call, dealing with one of the most relevant yet also most thorny and sensitive issues these days, the war in Ukraine, where nobody can claim to know where exactly we are heading. So I will do my best to contribute a frank and honest opinion to this exchange, which may lead us to the discussion under your able guidance, Noelle. So let me state at the outset, I agree with literally every point Minister Coveney has made in his opening remarks. Participants may take this as further proof of how Germany and Ireland feel about each other as very like-minded partners in Europe indeed, and I'll come back to that. And in my introduction, I would like to echo what the Minister said by focusing my remarks in a certain pragmatic way on three leitmotif tasks that I consider essential for strengthening security and democracy through unity among European partners, our most important asset, as I believe. So 1, let's count our blessings. 2, let's prepare for the long haul. We are in a difficult marathon, I'm afraid, not a sprint. And 3, let's develop the opportunities Ireland and the German-Irish partnership have to strengthen Europe in this difficult period. So first point, our blessings. As with the COVID crisis before, the EU has no doubt shown remarkable unity in its reaction to Russia's war in Ukraine. Of course, some critics within and without the EU did and will probably continue to focus on divergences between the reactions of partners to the crisis. But I believe facts speak indeed louder than those words. 6 packages of sanctions agreed upon by partners, more powerful than any sanctions ever before, and the readiness to go ahead with further sanctions if need be. Full and deep political solidarity showed with Ukraine, culminating in the recent proposal to offer EU candidate status to Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova, made by the heads of state and government of the 3 founding members of the European community, France, Germany, and Italy, plus Romania at their visit to Ukraine last week. The reaction of President Zelensky, I think, and other leading figures in Ukraine to this move made it crystal clear how much this gesture of solidarity was appreciated. And then the Zeitenwende, as Chancellor Scholz coined it, only 3 days after the war started, the change of an era, Germany foregoing the historic principle of never sending weapons to conflict areas, with the aim to drastically step up Germany's capabilities and national and European defense. On the one hand, with the 100 billion euro enhancement program for the German army, the Bundeswehr, plus our government's decision to supply military support to Ukraine for as long as it takes, including, as a latest commitment, some highly sophisticated weaponry, the IRIS-T air defense system that on its own is able to protect an entire megacity against attacks from the sky, and only very recently the delivery of tank howitzers from Germany and Netherlands that were delivered these days. With this, Germany moved in sync with other transatlantic and EU partners who all have, in one way or the other, increased their capabilities for deterrence. In the case of Finland and Sweden, obviously articulated in their decision to apply for NATO membership, and also in the case of Ireland, with as I see, the ongoing discussion on the limits of neutrality and the readiness to drastically step up efforts in different areas of national defense, including cyber. So quite a Zeitenwende in its own right. With all of that, we are together quite well prepared for the challenges ahead. But let's face it, it's, as I said, a marathon, not a sprint. And here again, let me start with the positive, that the war waged on Ukraine did not turn out to be a sprint right at the outset, as Russia may well have expected, is a political and military success brought forward to a very, very large extent by the courage and determination of the Ukrainian leadership and the Ukrainian people. But let's call a spade a spade. The war is not likely to be over soon. As sad and sobering as it may sound, the best scenario available for now seems to be some kind of war of attrition, with certainly many more casualties along the way through Russia's reckless and atrocious attacks on innocent civilians. Which leaves us, Ukraine and its allies, with a decisive task to run this marathon to the very end, at least until both sides may come to the conclusion that further fighting should give way to diplomatic negotiations of the first leg, a decision both sides are clearly not prepared to take for the time being, and understandably so. From this follow my two preconditions. We must have a clear understanding as the entire EU of what we expect and would like Ukraine to achieve in this war, and Russia not to achieve, respectively, so that we can accurately design our further support for our Ukrainian partners and advise them accordingly if and whenever asked. In this context, President Biden's recent paper, What America Will and Will Not Do in Ukraine, seems of particular relevance to me, since it provides orientation on defining the scope and limitations of our actions in sync with our big transatlantic neighbor. We want to see, and here I quote from the Biden paper, a democratic, independent, sovereign, and prosperous Ukraine with the means to deter and defend itself against further aggression. We do not seek a war between NATO and Russia. We are not encouraging or enabling Ukraine to strike beyond its borders. We do not want to prolong the war just to inflict pain on Russia. End of quote. I assume, though of course I'm not entirely sure, that all European partners could basically subscribe to this scope of objectives. They definitely seem reasonable to me. Yet, whatever the case, striving at greatest possible unity on our objectives should be a top priority, since the result will have to serve as a much needed political compass in these difficult times ahead. Which leads to the second key precondition. We must redouble our efforts to secure coherence, reliability, and sustainability in the positions we take, commitments we make. No doubt the war marathon will go along with the even more tangible impact of all its negative fallout, also on our citizens, the side effects of sanctions on ourselves, plus counter-sanctions by Russia, as we see, the effect of drastically rising energy prices on our economies, the food supply crisis worldwide, Minister Coveney talked about that, the interruption of supply chains, of raw materials, and the financial impact of all of this on inflation in general. All this will most certainly be felt as an ever-growing burden the longer it lingers on, increasing the risk that the initial wide and heartfelt impulse of solidarity within our societies may begin to fade. Please get me right. My point is, let's brace and prepare ourselves for this not to happen. Let's concentrate our attention on all it takes in order not to fall behind promises made, as well as carefully thinking through the implications when making new commitments. Sometimes, from life experience, the good old wisdom may apply that the better is the enemy of the good, especially when the most precious feature, unity among EU partners, is at stake. Ladies and gentlemen, this takes me to my third and last leitmotif, the new opportunities for Ireland and our bilateral partnership to the benefit of Europe. For the sake of brevity, I just sketched this out and we could come back to that. Almost needless to say, post-Brexit Ireland is a very different country from what it used to be. It is an EU partner with some drastically increased political clout. We experience it at the international level in its role within the UN Security Council. Minister spoke about it, the peacekeeping. Every day, every year on St. Patrick's Day, obviously, you know what I'm referring to, or when Ireland brokered the OECD deal on corporate tax, very important to all of us. I do believe that Europe would greatly benefit from even more of Ireland's voice of pragmatic reason and its inherent sense for the middle ground, a special skill possibly developed over the years in handling the complex Northern Ireland file. This is my first impression here in Ireland. This experience can be obviously of particular value when difficult and emotional issues are at stake. It's one thing when a big partner like France and Germany says something, but it may come across as an even stronger argument among partners when a smaller partner like Ireland makes that very point against the background of its traditional role and experience. So alas, Minister, everything comes at a price. Ireland's new political cloud makes us only more aware of its growing responsibility for the greater good of European interests. And I think in your introduction, you made many points that made it clear how much you are living up to that expectation already. So in closing, I'd like to just highlight one particular area which, as yet another consequence of Russia's war on Ukraine, has become of much greater strategic relevance now: the urgent search for alternative energy sources. which sheds a totally new light, politically totally new light on Ireland's enormous potential of on and offshore wind energy, as well as hydrogen or ammonia. What used to be some rather theoretical potential to fight climate change in the distant future has now become a realistic option in the midterm time frame, provided the necessary political decisions to make it happen are taken now. Germany, and I know many other partners as well, are highly interested in being Ireland's partner in this. So I end on this, dear friends, and happy to come back on some of the issues or issues that I left out during Q&A. Thank you. Gora Milan Margav.
Gahanawa, Gurmagat Ambassador, Danka. Fantastic Irish pronunciation, Ambassador. Very impressed, and thank you for that really comprehensive, wide-ranging keynote address. And without further ado, we might just kick into the questions. And I'd remind our audience, great questions are coming in. You can see on the ticker tape at the bottom how to submit them. So make sure to send in your comments and questions, and we'll have the opportunity to put them to the Minister and the Ambassador. And I might just kick off with a question to both the Minister and the Ambassador, if I may. Just in relation to, Minister, you touched upon the European Commission obviously has recommended granting Ukraine official status as an EU candidate country, and you spoke about the council meeting. And many people in Ukraine have said that such a move would really provide an invaluable morale boost for people during this war that's happening in Ukraine, and where indeed thousands of Ukrainian people have perished and tragically lost their lives. And for both Minister and Ambassador, if I may, wearing, if I can, an Irish and a German perspective, what are your expectations around Ukraine's path to EU membership? Obviously, Minister, as you know, this year in Ireland, we're marking 50 years since the referendum that led to our accession to the EU, and that path and that journey, which has been so transformative. How do you see that from an Irish perspective? And then, Ambassador, I'll ask you to respond from the German perspective. Thank you.
Well, Noelle, we've taken a very pro-enlargement stance for many years, and I think that's because of Ireland's own experience of EU membership. So, you know, the last 50 years really has been 50 years of progression, transformation, growth, not just in terms of economic opportunities, but also in terms of quality of life. So everything from gender equality to respecting LGBTQ communities, to workers' rights, to environmental standards. You know, it's a long, long list, as well as, of course, EU money helping to build roads and motorways and you know, connecting our cities and so on. So, you know, Ireland's journey over the last 50 years has been far from perfect, but it has been an extraordinarily positive transformation if you look at it in the round. And the European Union's influence on that has just been absolutely central to everything. And we see that stability, which Ireland now enjoys, despite all of the disruption of Brexit and other things that we've had to deal with in recent years, the foundation that we get in terms of stability for our economy, for our banking system, which was broken, of course, and had to be fixed, in terms of currency, in terms of energy connectivity, you know, it's a really very powerful stabilizer for Ireland to manage and navigate stormy waters when we have to as a small country. And we want that stability for other countries too. Countries that are currently being torn apart by war, countries that are trying to make steps forward in terms of the kind of democracy that we enjoy today, whether it's environmental standards, whether it's independence of their judiciary, whether it's freedom of speech, whether it's media, whatever it is. And the benchmarks that are required to join the European Union are in themselves drivers of change. But for politicians and political leaders in those countries and for electorates to actually accept that level of change and the pace of it, there's got to be a reward at the end of it. You know, and the reward is you join this group of countries that work together that has extraordinary solidarity. And there is a reason, by the way, why Ukraine and its government have prioritized EU membership over NATO membership. So, President Zelensky has said, if the price of peace is that we have to give a commitment not to join NATO in the future, well, then he's willing to consider that. But he is not willing to consider moving away from the prospect of EU membership. And that is because I think Ukrainians see what we have, what comes with EU membership, and that's what they want. That's what their dreams are built around. That's what they're fighting for today. That's why we are seeing between 100 and 200 Ukrainians dying in battle every day. That's the level of tragedy and the level of sacrifice that Ukraine is making to be part of what we take for granted almost on a daily basis. So for me, the idea that we could send them a signal while fighting this war, where this monster is trying to take over their country from the east, the idea that we would give them a signal that actually, sorry, no, you're not going to make the grade ever, or we can't accommodate a country of your size, or Ukraine's accession or membership could destabilize the EU. I just think that would have been an extraordinarily negative message to send to a country at war, fighting for its very survival. So, I think the Commission's recommendation is a fair one. It's a good one. It's also realistic in terms of the standards that are needed. And I think Ukraine accepts that. What they want is the chance to make the journey, but they want to get all the way there. They don't want some kind of second-rate membership. They want full membership and equality, and they want the kind of transformation that Ireland has been through, that Poland has been through, that the Baltic states have been through since they joined. And in many ways, I think we have a duty to hold that prize out for them as they continue to sacrifice such extraordinary amounts every day and every week as this war continues. And so to encourage them, to support them, to keep a light on the horizon that they can navigate by, I think that's important. But also, I think the message that the European Union sends to other countries, Moldova, Georgia, the Western Balkans, that actually this is a project that wants to expand. It's a peace project, it's a stability project, it's a pro-democracy project, it's a quality of life project, it's an economic opportunity and trading project. All of these things. The European Union isn't a fixed thing. It's an idea that evolves and changes and grows, and it's a force for good in our continent. And that's why I'm a big believer in, despite all of the pressures and potential instability that we'll have to manage if we expand quickly, I think we have a duty to do it, because so many people, I don't know whether anybody saw the images on social media of the number of people in a mass pro-EU demonstration in Georgia, over the last 48 hours, wanting to remind people peacefully that actually they're there, they want membership, they know that there are obstacles in their way, but they're still fully committed to that journey to EU membership. And I think, we need to remind ourselves that this isn't all about ourselves, Ireland, Germany, France, within the European Union. This is a project that is about driving a better way of life for many countries that are currently our neighbours and are under extraordinary pressure. If the European Union stagnates because we try to sort of build a fence around ourselves to keep the rest of the world out because we like the way we have it right now, that'll be the start of the end. And that's why, for me, enlargement is Europe on the front foot, which is where we need to be. And in particular for Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine's journey to full membership will take time. This is not going to happen in the short term. But I think a lot of countries will help that journey be as short as it can be, while also maintaining the standards that are needed for full accession to the EU. But I think this week is going to be a good week for sending strong, powerful messages to the people of Ukraine who are exhausted, I suspect, but still resilient. And I think they will realize that the European Union is reaching out to them in a way that's very real and in a way that's not going to change.
Thank you, Minister. Very, very eloquently and succinctly put as ever. Ambassador, I might ask for the German perspective. Thank you.
No, obviously, again, I fully go along with this. I mean, Chancellor Scholz, the leaders during their visit to the Ukraine made that point. We want to send this clear signal now. That is a psychological booster, well deserved by Ukraine. We see them, they defend our values, and that is it. And I think we now all hope that at the Council, all members will come to that very same conclusion, to send out this very message to Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova, and in a sense also to Georgia. Simply being true to what I said in my introduction, it's perhaps a déformation professionnelle that you always think of all the implications, potential consequences. Having worked myself on the Transnistria conflict in the Republic of Moldova for some time, and was also having been in charge at the Ministry for the Ukraine at an earlier stage, knowing that this long way will put before us many questions. I mean, we see that with the process in Turkey that has almost pretty much come to a standstill. We see that we are still, after many, many years, in the process with the Western Balkan states. If that gives a positive momentum, all the better. But these are issues that that refer to each other. Partners will look at the other members too. And then, of course, I think if it goes ahead in a positive way, as we hope, it will be a very different union. Minister Coveney referred to that, which I think would encourage us to think about some other reforms of a more general character, the consensus in the Council, to other aspects that may come along with a union that in that case would of course have a different balance, a different feature. All this is not defeatist at all. As I said, the signal is out. We want this. That is the political message. But in order to avoid disappointment, perhaps even at early stages, I think it's fair enough to raise people's attention to the many applications, and in that sense, as I said, I hope that the political decision will follow now on Thursday and Friday.
Great, thank you, Ambassador. And we have a question in from Professor John O'Hagan in Trinity. And John's question, again, I might ask both of you to comment, and Minister, I'll turn to you first. And I'm just reading it here. How is Russia, whose economy is not much bigger than that of Spain, allowed to build up such control over the European energy and indirectly the European food sectors? And given the small relative size of the Russian economy, can it continue to fund large military expenditure? So, Minister, I think a two-hatted question for you there, perhaps. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is to that question is that Russia, while its economy is, I think it's smaller than Germany's. Actually, it's certainly no bigger than Germany's. So it's a large economy, but not an economic superpower or anything like it, in comparison to other parts of the world. But it is an extraordinarily large country with enormous natural resources, and I think Europe has made the mistake of becoming over-reliant on natural resources sourced in Russia. I think it's easy to say that with the benefit of hindsight, but I mean, you know, it made sense to many people that we would try to build a better and more stable relationship with Russia, and part of that was trade, was pipelines, was sourcing available natural resources and products from Russia, and that has happened over quite a number of decades. Don't forget as well that Russia's influence over many countries in terms of connectivity on the eastern borders of the European Union is a historic one as well, in terms of pipeline connections and heating systems and so on. So, I think we're now unfortunately being exposed because of the significant tension and falling out between the EU and Russia because of what they're doing in Ukraine. And so that interconnectivity has created huge problems in terms of energy supply and of course driving up prices. But I think we have no choice, and I think the direction of travel now is very clear. Some countries have to, have a bigger problem to manage as a result of that, but we are clearly going to move away now from a reliance on Russian oil and gas permanently, but it will take time to do that. The whole point of sanctions is that they hurt Russia more than they hurt us. And that is why it's been difficult to agree a 6th sanctions package. I think it's why it will be difficult to agree a 7th sanctions package. I know this is maybe one area where Germany and Ireland have a slightly different perspective, where Germany is in some ways understandably focusing on implementing what's been agreed. Ireland continues to push for another package of sanctions that goes even further, because we believe that the signal has to be sent from the EU to the Kremlin that the price of this war is going to keep increasing, so that we can provide a deterrent to its continuation. But yeah, I mean, Russia is physically an enormous country. It has a lot of natural resources. Its economy is built on energy exportation. Since the start of this war, the world has spent over 100 billion euros on paying Russia for oil and gas and energy. And if you think about that for a second, it's quite an extraordinary number. It's almost €1 billion a day, or equivalent to that. Not all coming from the EU, but a significant portion of that. And then on the food side, of course, the combination of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia contribute enormously to global food supply in terms of traded grain and other products like vegetable oils and so on. So about 30% of wheat that's traded comes from Russia. If you speak to the World Food Programme, for example, who are the largest humanitarian organization on the planet by some margin, they source 60% of their wheat from Belarus and Ukraine, a supply that's now been cut off. So you can see why that would impact on. It's impacting on us from an inflation and price point of view, but we're a developed economy that can afford to pay, even though it's putting us under some pressure. But the current food prices and food scarcity will mean that some people will starve in some parts of the country, some parts of the world. So yeah, Russia is a source of significant amounts, and Russia combined with Ukraine and Belarus is a very significant source of both food supply in terms of raw materials and also energy. Europe is now effectively plotting a course to move away from a reliance on Russia, because they have become such an unreliable partner and such an aggressor in the context of this war. Now, unfortunately, what's happening, as we've seen in recent days, is that Russia is also adapting and looking to change their trade profile, to move away from a reliance on the EU and look to other big economies to be able to sell energy products, oil in particular, because gas is more difficult to divert because of pipelines. But that, I think, is going to be a continuing story, which of course is why it needs to drive what the ambassador said earlier, is this energy revolution across Europe built on renewables. And in the short term, we're going to see some countries turning back to coal, some countries staying on gas supplies longer, some countries looking at building LNG plants who otherwise wouldn't be doing it. But that's all short-term emergency planning. The medium-term plan for energy supply in the EU now is a massive investment in renewables, the likes of which we've never seen. And by the way, for Ireland, that is an extraordinary opportunity, given the fact that we have 10 times the sea surface that we have land surface. And much of that sea surface is actually has some of the most consistent wind speeds on the planet. And the technology around floating platforms and so on now will allow us to exploit that in a way that we haven't before. So it's quite an exciting opportunity for us in terms of that energy change. But in the short term, of course, Ireland, like every other EU country, is going to have massive inflation pressures. It's going to put households and businesses under a lot of pressure, like we're already seeing. And the government needs to try to respond to that as best we can, without promising that we can entirely reverse it. But yeah, Russia in some ways is a military superpower, has become that. They spend an enormous amount of their wealth on military spend. They are a military superpower, but they are not an economic superpower. But unfortunately, their economy is built on something that we have relied heavily on within the EU, which was the supply of oil and gas. Less so in Ireland, actually. Very little of the gas that comes into Ireland actually comes from Russia, as it happens. But of course, we are interconnected, and therefore, from a pricing point of view, we're deeply impacted as well.
Great, thank you, Minister. Ambassador.
Yeah, thank you. First, I would say there is no politician in Germany of red, green, yellow, black, whatever color that would not agree that we have relied for far too long on Russian gas and oil, too much, become too dependent. There are historic reasons for that. You know, they go back probably to the day of the Cold War, where energy exchange was one of the areas where in a very Cold War climate, you had some kind of exchange and link between the countries, but that doesn't explain why that was not seen earlier. And I think everyone has publicly stated it, this for historians to analyze, but we are beyond that. We think that the sanctions are a strong package on Russia. It will show over time. That's why I talked about the marathon, that we have to win, or where we have to keep the stamina. I would not rule out that in a foreseeable time there could be an effect, an internal effect in Russia on that, from the population, from political circles, from economic business circles, whatever. We don't know, but that is what we hope for. And in that sense, it is so important that what the minister also highlighted, that we make sure that the sanctions do not hurt us in the meantime more than they do hurt the opponent. I don't think, Minister, that Germany is against moving further on sanctions. It is just that weighing the odds in this very spirit that you always see. I mean, what can have an effect on our own population that may perhaps reduce support for what we are trying to do at the political level, as I referred to in the introduction. So that is the spirit. Especially our Deputy Chancellor, Mr. Habeck, who is the Minister for Business, Climate Change and Energy, he has now a strongly security portfolio, is trying to find new ways and means. And just ending on what you also said, never sort of miss a good crisis for certain objectives. I think our search for alternative energies has got a big booster, because also the general price level makes now some alternative energy sources commercially competitive. And sometimes you get support for other political goals from an end that you didn't really expect. So it's a very complex issue, but I think there are no taboos on the German side, and definitely we want to win this marathon.
Great, thank you very much, Ambassador. And I'm just very conscious of the red clock in the corner signaling that we're a minute over the hour mark. So I'm nothing if trying to keep to my word of making sure that the minister gets out on time. So ladies and gentlemen, it falls to me to draw this morning's event to a close. Thank you all for your comments and questions. I know we didn't get a chance to go to everything, but I really do think credit to the Minister and the Ambassador for so comprehensively engaging and in their wide-ranging remarks and address. I'm sure they touched upon a lot of the comments and the questions that we received. So my thanks to our distinguished panel of guests with us this morning. Minister for Foreign Affairs and Minister for Defence, Simon Coveney. We know how busy you are, Minister, and really appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. And His Excellency Ambassador Meier-Klodt, Germany's Ambassador to Ireland. Ambassador, it's always great to have you with us, and thank you very much for your time. If I may thank Katie O'Connor and all her colleagues at the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung for all their support and assistance with us here in European Movement Ireland on our supporting democracy engagements. It's fantastic and very much appreciated. So thank you, Katie and colleagues. And of course, thank you, our audience, for joining with us this morning. I do hope you found our webinar informative, useful, and thought-provoking, and certainly a lot of food for thought for us all. Please do keep an eye on our website, europeanmovement.ie, about the next event that we will be having with CAS. And for now, thank you to my own team here in European Movement Ireland. And I wish you all a good morning, and thank you for your attention. Slán, auf Wiedersehen.